Hey, who's that handsome guy? Both Sarah's husband Jack and their friend Linda were taken aback by her question even before they stepped through the backyard gate. Linda followed Sarah's gaze and spotted a friend of Dave, Sarah's brother-in-law. "Just so you know, I'm right here," Jack reminded his wife. "What, can't I admire a good-looking guy when I see one?" she retorted. "Well, if you're going to check out some guy, I'd prefer if you kept it to yourself," Jack responded a bit bluntly before shifting his focus to their host. "Hi, Linda, sorry about that." Linda and her husband Mike were hosting an outdoor birthday party for their daughter who had just turned 13. Linda saw them approaching but hadn't greeted them yet. She chose to overlook Sarah's question. "No worries, you two, come on in," she said, still holding the gate. "Where should these go?" Jack asked, holding up a case of beer. "There are a few coolers by the tree filled with ice, Jack. Some have soft drinks for the kids, but the others are for the beer. Just pick an empty one. Gifts go on that table over there," she directed Sarah, who was carrying a nicely wrapped box. Mike, the co-host, spotted them and came over to welcome them. "Hey, welcome you too," he said, kissing Sarah on the cheek. "Jack, let me take that," as he reached for the case. Sarah made another attempt. "Hey, Mike, who's the handsome guy sitting over there with your brother?" Mike, a bit slow to catch on and unaware of the previous conversation, looked where Sarah had gestured. "Oh, his name is Bob something. He works construction with Dave." "Why, do you know him?" "No, but I wouldn't mind," she replied. "I mean, what a hunk." Mike glanced at Jack, surprised. Not fully understanding the situation, he tried to lighten the mood. "Watch out, Jack, sounds like she's on the prowl," he joked. Jack was just as surprised. It seemed like his wife was trying to make him jealous for some reason, but he didn't want to ruin the party, so he chuckled it off and forced a smile. "Yeah, sounds like she's ready to trade me in for a younger guy." "That'll be the day," Linda quipped, giving Jack's arm a playful slap. "Well, come on in, you guys," Mike said. "Linda, why don't you show Sarah where to put the gifts?" When Linda saw the expression on her husband's face, she understood exactly what he was implying. He hoped she would inquire about Sarah's behavior. On the way to the gift table, she lowered her voice to ensure no one else could overhear. "Okay, Sarah, what's happening? Did you and Jack have an argument or something?" "What do you mean?" "Don't give me that. We've all been friends for a long time, and I've never heard you speak like that in front of Jack. Something's up. I'm just giving him a taste of his own medicine. He's out all day flirting with every pretty girl he sees. You know Katie Johnson?" "Yeah, she saw Jack in a restaurant a few days ago. He obviously didn't notice her. She told me the waitress came over and kissed him. They talked and laughed through lunch, flirting the whole time. Sarah, Jack's a friendly, outgoing guy. That's just his personality. Having a girl kiss you is more than being friendly, Linda, it's crossing a line, and you know it. Mike kissed you on the cheek a minute ago. That's different. We've been friends for years. This is some waitress he flirts with when he goes there. I don't like it, and it definitely doesn't pass the wife test." "The wife test?" "Yeah, you know, guys use it all the time, but for them, it's the husband test. A wife shouldn't do anything in public or private that she wouldn't do in front of her husband. Well, what's good for the goose, as they say. So you chose my daughter's birthday party to give Jack a hard time?" "Don't worry. I won't do anything drastic. I wasn't even thinking about it until I saw Dave's friend over there. He's perfect. I just want to teach Jack a lesson. Well, do me a favor and don't start any fights, okay?" "I won't. Besides, look at that guy. He's built like a tank. Jack would be crazy to mess with him. All right, I see more guests coming up the walk, so I have to go do my meet and greet thing. I'll catch up with you later. Remember, no fights, okay?" "No fights, Linda, I promise." She glanced around and spotted Jennifer, the guest of honor, chatting with her friends. She decided to go over and wish her a happy birthday. Jack had just finished helping Mike with the beer and had the same idea. They both arrived at the same time. Sarah spoke first. "Congrats, honey, you're officially a teenager. You can really give your parents a hard time now," she joked. "That goes for me too, Jen," Jack added, "the congrats part, I mean." "I'm not sure about the giving your folks a hard time part," he teased. Jennifer laughed at Jack's joke. It was well known in their circle that she'd had a crush on him since she was a toddler. "Thanks," she replied while giving Sarah a hug and Jack a kiss on the cheek. "These are my friends Coral, Kathy, and Debbie," she introduced. They chatted with Jen and her friends briefly, but Sarah was eager to proceed with her plan to teach Jack a lesson. "Hey, sweetie," she addressed the birthday girl, "I'm going to go say hi to your uncle. Catch you later." Jack was about to accompany her when he noticed Mike signaling to him. As Sarah began to walk away, he remarked, "Behave yourself." She shot him a wicked glance. Approaching Mike, who was still by the coolers, Jack inquired, "What's up, buddy?" "Just wanted to give you a heads up. Linda talked to Sarah. Seems like you've been flirting with some waitress. Sarah caught wind of it and has this idea to teach you a lesson. I'm guessing that's what all this hunk talk is about." Jack pondered for a moment. "I have no idea what she's talking about. I haven't flirted with any waitress that I'm aware of. Did she mention where or who supposedly saw me? I'm not sure, she didn't specify, but I think she's planning to use Bob to make you jealous. So try to stay cool, okay?" Meanwhile, as Mike and Jack conversed, Sarah approached her target. "Hi, Dave." "Hey, Sarah. How's it going?" "All right, I guess. Who's your handsome friend?" Dave was taken aback while his friend stood and introduced himself. "Hi, I'm Bob. I assume you were talking about me, right?" he said with a charming grin. "Who else?" she replied. "Hey, Sarah," Dave interjected, "where's Jack?" "He's over there chatting with your brother." "I'd love one of those," she said, pointing to the beer Bob held. "Hey, Dave, why don't you be a gentleman and grab the lady a beer while we get to know each other better?" Not wanting to be rude, Dave obliged. As soon as he headed for the coolers, Bob offered Sarah his now vacant seat. As she sat down, she glanced over to see her husband glaring at her. Seeing his reaction only fueled her confidence that her plan was working. She turned to engage in conversation with her new acquaintance. Meanwhile, when Dave reached the coolers, he approached Mike and Jack. "Hey, what's up with Sarah?" "Why, what happened?" Jack inquired. "She's cozying up to Bob over there." "Who's he anyway?" "He works with me. We're on that big high-rise downtown. I've known him about 6 months. Seems all right, but he's a bit of a ladies' man, and I wouldn't trust him around women." "He didn't bring a date?" Jack asked. "No, it was sort of a last-minute thing. He was supposed to play golf today. We got off work last night around 5, and he got a text canceling. Started complaining about having nothing to do today, so I invited him to the party." At least Jack now understood what his wife was up to, though he wasn't sure how to handle it. He knew Sarah well when she got an idea in her head. She wouldn't let it go until she made her point. Ignoring her might push her further, but confronting her might provoke Bob. He aimed to avoid that scenario at all costs. "Dave, do me a favor, will you? Just keep an eye on things. Let me know if it starts to get out of hand." Dave acknowledged Jack's instructions and grabbed a cold beer from the cooler before returning to where Bob and Sarah were engaged in conversation. Handing Sarah her beer and pulling up another chair, Dave felt it was time to interject. Hoping Bob would catch the hint, he mentioned having seen the pictures Jack took of the lumberyard fire and praised his talent, wondering if Jack planned to enter the press photographers contest again that year. Though slightly annoyed by the interruption, Sarah politely replied that she assumed Jack would participate. She then informed Bob that her husband worked as a photographer for the Tribune and had won several awards at a state contest for press photographers the previous year. Bob responded with a hint of disdain, acknowledging Jack's presence across the room. Sarah confirmed it was indeed Jack, a response delivered with a dismissive tone that didn't go unnoticed by Bob or Dave. Bob shifted the conversation, expressing his enjoyment of working with his hands and constructing enduring structures. He then directed a question to Dave, asking for validation, to which Dave could only respond with agreement. Assuming Bob had effectively shut down the conversation about her husband, Sarah immediately resumed chatting with Bob, essentially excluding Dave from the discussion. He felt foolish. He'd heard Bob use that same line about working with his hands on women in bars before. It always seemed to impress them, and here Dave had unwittingly given Bob an opportunity. Feeling he was doing more damage than good, Dave excused himself to wish his niece happy birthday for what felt like the 20th time. Jack circulated, mingling with the others while closely observing Sarah and her companion. Although none of the men mentioned his wife's interaction with another man, the women began to gossip. Jack overheard Jenny discussing the situation with her friends, mentioning that the man Sarah was with worked as a newspaper photographer. She added that her dad commented on how photographers often find themselves in various challenging situations due to their job. Jenny expressed surprise that Jack hadn't intervened physically. Jack chuckled to himself. It wasn't really Bob's fault, after all, it was his wife's. And as frustrated as he sometimes felt, he'd never resort to violence against her or any other woman. Glancing over, he noticed an empty beer bottle next to Sarah's chair and another in her hand already. She tended to drink more when she was nervous. This wasn't good. Bob had 3 empty bottles beside his chair. Just then, Mike mentioned that everyone seemed to be getting hungry. As he stood by the grill, Jack, preoccupied with Sarah, hadn't even noticed the enticing aroma of grilling meat. Mike then announced the food options available, including burgers, brats, and chicken patties, along with various sides on the nearby table for everyone to help themselves. Jack thought it might be a good opportunity to separate Bob from his wife. Perhaps they could find a quiet corner to eat, and he could learn more about this person he was supposedly flirting with. As he turned toward them, he saw the potential lovebirds setting their beers down beside their chairs and standing up. Apparently, Bob had decided that Sarah was his for the day and possessively took her by the elbow. Not happening, Jack muttered to himself. He quickly walked over. "Excuse me, could you remove your hand from my wife?" Bob immediately released Sarah's arm and raised both hands in a conciliatory gesture. "Sorry," he half-chuckled, "we were just heading to get some food." "Yeah, well, I can handle it from here, thanks," Jack retorted angrily. He grasped Sarah's other elbow and led her over to the food table. "What's gotten into you?" Sarah questioned. That was incredibly rude. Ignoring his wife's remark, Jack guided her in front of him as they joined the food line. "Grab some food," he stated flatly. "You and I are going to have a talk over by the shed while we eat." Observing the confrontation between Jack and Bob, Dave seized the chance to speak to his colleague, now alone for the first time in a while. "What are you doing?" he asked, irritated. "She's married to one of my brother's closest friends. Leave her alone." "Hey man, you should be telling her to leave me alone. She's the one hitting on me." "I'm just being polite." "Polite, my foot." "Seriously, Bob, cut it out. Look, if you think you stand a chance with her, forget it. She's using you to get back at Jack over some waitress. Stay out of it. Listen, married or not, I've never turned down a beautiful woman like that in my life. I know women, and I think you're mistaken about her using me. She's genuinely interested, I can tell. I think you should leave. This is my niece's birthday party, and I don't want any trouble." All right, I'll back off. If she approaches me again, I'll send her right back to her husband." "All right. If you don't, you're out of here, Bob." "I mean it." "Scout's honor," he responded, holding up the Boy Scout salute. "Now, can I go get something to eat?" "Yeah, go ahead." Sarah wasn't particularly bothered by Jack stepping in between her and Bob. They had only known each other for a few hours, yet he was already becoming overly familiar, not to mention the suggestive comments he was making. Although it amused her to see how easily she could manipulate a man like that when she wanted to, she could sense from the way Jack had taken hold of her arm that she had pushed her husband as far as she should. She had promised Linda no drama, and Jack had proven he wasn't intimidated by Bob's physique. She needed to spend the rest of the day with her husband. She just hoped he had learned his lesson. They both filled their plates with food, and Jack gestured toward the shed, away from the crowd. When they found a quiet spot, he handed Sarah his plate. "Here, hold this while I fetch a couple of chairs. I'll be right back." Despite his anger, Jack remained a gentleman, holding the back of her chair as Sarah sat down. He pulled his own chair alongside so they could talk privately. After a few bites, Jack couldn't contain himself any longer. As he was always direct, he questioned Sarah about the talk regarding him flirting with a waitress, expressing his dislike for such games. Sarah responded by saying she wasn't certain about the exact details, but that it supposedly occurred sometime last week. Jack remarked sarcastically about the vagueness of the information. Sarah then suggested that Jack might have a better understanding of the situation than she did, questioning if he flirts with every waitress. Surprised, Jack interjected, asking if he was told he kissed them. Sarah confirmed this, leading Jack to assert that there were only two possibilities: either it was a mix-up, or someone was feeding her lies, as he had only kissed Sarah since they started dating. Sarah gazed into his eyes. Though she usually felt she could gauge his honesty through his gaze, she wasn't entirely sure, as he had never lied to her as far as she knew. Why would someone claim they saw you kissing a waitress if it wasn't true? "Beats me," he shrugged, taking another bite from his burger. "Since she's your friend, ask her. How do you know it's a woman? It better be a woman. If a male friend told you he saw me kissing a waitress, then you've got your answer." Initially, Sarah entertained the thought that he might have seen her friend in the restaurant and kissed the waitress anyway, disregarding the potential consequences. But she wasn't sure what he meant by his last statement. "What do you mean, if it's a man?" "I've answered my own question, simple. If it is a man, he's into you and trying to stir up trouble between us. He's probably hoping to cozy up to you by playing the supportive friend." "That's absurd." "Is it? Think about it. Was it a man?" "No." "All right, then we're back to square one. You'll have to ask your friend why she's misleading you." An uneasy silence followed as they both finished their lunches. When they were done, Jack had a few parting words. "This is Jenny's birthday party, and I won't let it be spoiled by a fight with your friend. So if you keep cozying up to him like you have been, I'll just leave you here, and you can find your own way home. Or you can spend the night with Mr. Muscles, but then you won't have a home to come back to. Understand?" She was taken aback by his intensity. "Jack, calm down. I'm not going home with Bob. I wasn't even considering it. I was just trying to show you what it feels like to have your spouse flirting with someone else. That's all. Well, now you've shown me, so let's end it here." He stood, took his wife's paper plate and empty beer bottle, and walked over to dispose of them. As he turned back, he was relieved to see his wife right by his side. Bob, however, was displeased. He had been sneaking glances at the two of them talking while he sat alone eating his chicken patty. He had no doubt Sarah was genuinely interested. She was eager for action. However, he also acknowledged the need for discretion. Earlier, he had hoped for an opportunity to slip away with her, perhaps to an upstairs bedroom or his car, but now such plans were off the table. They were being watched. He'd have to postpone indulging his desires, at least for now. Despite their underlying tensions, Jack and Sarah were determined to enjoy the rest of the party. She stuck close to him for the remainder of the day, occasionally drifting off to chat with friends, but always returning to his side. The only other interaction Sarah had with Bob was during the group rendition of Happy Birthday when everyone gathered around Jenny's cake. Bob took advantage of the moment to sidle up beside her and discreetly touch her backside while everyone sang. Initially, she assumed it was Jack, but when she glanced over, she saw Bob wearing a smug grin on his face. She was stunned by his audacity. Glancing around quickly to check for any observers, she found everyone focused on Jenny. Normally, she would have reacted by slapping him, but she knew it would only stir up trouble, something she desperately wanted to avoid. Besides, she realized it was partly her own fault for encouraging him. If given the chance, she'd apologize to him and make it clear she wasn't interested. He withdrew his hand to join the applause as the birthday girl effortlessly blew out the candles. Jack glanced over when he heard Bob's voice nearby but saw nothing significant. Certainly, Sarah wasn't about to confess to Jack about Bob's inappropriate behavior during Happy Birthday. Naturally, Bob interpreted her silence as consent. He knew how to manipulate the situation. She had to stay close to her husband to avoid suspicion, but eventually, she would need to slip away to use the restroom indoors. Hopefully, he could catch her alone to arrange a meeting. He'd keep a discreet watch. For those aware of the earlier incident, the perceived threat seemed to have passed. Much to their relief, both Bob and Sarah seemed to be on their best behavior. So, with the possible exception of Jack, they all relaxed and let down their guard. Jack, however, had encountered guys like Bob before, men who thought they were irresistible to women and knew they were rarely dissuaded easily. Just to be cautious, he resolved to continue keeping an eye on the potential troublemaker. The party kicked into high gear after dinner. Mike turned up the outdoor speakers and played background music from Pandora while games were set up. A dartboard was placed on the large oak tree near the shed, and Jenny's friends helped her set up the beanbag toss. Some women gathered card tables for bingo. Jenny and her friends suggested a best-of-3 beanbag game to her parents, Jack and Sarah. Mike warned them about Jenny's skill. Fortunately, the adults won the first game, but the subsequent victories went to the youngsters. After the game, Sarah kissed Jack on the cheek and informed him that she needed to use the restroom and would return shortly. Jack replied that he might challenge Dave to a game of darts. Sarah stopped to chat with friends on her way to the house and was fortunate to find the downstairs restroom unoccupied, so she slipped inside. Dave observed Bob's departure and muttered to himself about it, catching Jack's attention. Jack paused mid-throw and inquired about Dave's comment. Dave clarified that Bob seemed to be leaving without saying goodbye or expressing gratitude for the invitation. Jack turned around and caught a glimpse of Bob exiting through the gate, suggesting that Bob might be upset because Sarah wasn't paying him attention anymore and mentioning that he probably had plans with her. Dave agreed, noting that Bob was skilled at charming women, recounting instances where he had seen Bob leave a bar with attractive women. Jack turned back to the dartboard, taking careful aim when a thought struck him. How would someone enter the house without being seen? They'd leave through the gate, circle around to the front, and enter that way. Handing the darts to Dave, Jack mentioned that he would be right back before making his way toward the back door. Sarah had finished her business and was touching up her makeup. Upon opening the bathroom door, she was stunned to find Bob standing there. Before she could react, he seized her shoulders and pinned her against the door frame, forcefully locking their lips together. In an instant, had Jack been a split second later, he would have witnessed his wife forcefully pushing Bob away. However, in that moment, she hesitated as she tried to regain her senses. It was then that Jack caught sight of them. He grabbed Bob's shoulder, pulling him away from Sarah, and with a forceful blow to Bob's solar plexus, sent him stumbling back into the washroom where he collapsed to one knee, gasping for breath. As Sarah's brain struggled to process the rapid events, she felt overwhelmed. It all happened so quickly. She turned to find her husband, but he was nowhere to be seen. Panicked, she searched in every direction, calling out for Jack, but he was nowhere in sight. Then she heard the sound of a car starting. Rushing to the front door, Sarah watched as their car backed out and drove off. Realizing how the situation must have appeared, especially given her previous interactions with Bob, she ignored Bob, who was still gasping for breath, and dashed out the back door. The first person she encountered was Dave, who was still waiting for Jack's return, unaware of the unfolding drama. "Dave, you have to drive me home now," she pleaded, her voice trembling with panic. Confused, Dave looked at her, trying to make sense of the situation. Sarah, what happened? Where's Jack? He left. He caught Bob kissing me and... What? Is he hurt? No, Bob's still in the house. I'm not sure if he's hurt or not. Jack punched him really hard. Dave couldn't help but smirk. Jack punched Bob? Yeah. Yeah, please, Dave, I have to get home so I can explain what happened. He was so mad, I'm not sure what he's gonna do. I'm afraid he's planning to leave me. I doubt that, Sarah. He's upset, but I don't think he's that upset. You didn't see him just now. Sarah, I was the first one here. I doubt I'll be able to get my car out. I'm sure I'm blocked in. Please, Dave. All right, give me a second to tell Mike we're leaving, and I'll see if we can get out of here. After briefing Mike, Dave returned, confirming their predicament. Sarah, you'll have to call a cab. I can't get out, but you can borrow my car. Are you serious? Thank you. Grateful and relieved, Sarah hurriedly got into Dave's car, knowing she needed to reach Jack before it was too late. There was only about a foot of space between Dave's car and the garage door. He turned the wheel completely to the right and edged forward until his front bumper gently nudged the door. Then he reversed, turning the wheel the other way until his rear bumper lightly touched the car behind him. He repeated this maneuver several times until he could back out onto his brother's meticulously kept front lawn, leaving only about 2 inches of clearance between his car and the one behind. Throughout the journey, Sarah remained silent, lost in her thoughts. She couldn't shake the image of her husband's enraged expression from her mind. His fury was unlike anything she had seen before, and his physical reaction was unprecedented. As they approached her driveway, anxiety gripped her. She dreaded facing whatever awaited her at home. Soon, they turned into her driveway, with Dave parking behind Jack's car. Dave offered to accompany her inside, but she hesitated briefly before declining, expressing gratitude but insisting that she would handle the situation herself since she felt responsible for it. Upon exiting the car, she signaled to Dave that she would manage and climbed the porch stairs, each step filled with apprehension. Entering the house, she prepared herself for what she might encounter. Jack was nowhere to be seen, and she worried he might be upstairs packing. Just as she began ascending the stairs to confront him, she heard the coffee grinder. A glimmer of hope flickered within her as she thought, he's making coffee. Jack, observing her silently from the kitchen doorway, broke the silence by asking if her lover had brought her home. Sarah clarified to Jack that Bob was not her lover, mentioning that the last time she saw him, he was still on the bathroom floor, struggling to catch his breath. Jack nodded in response, but remained silent, which unsettled Sarah. She had expected some kind of reaction from him, whether it be anger or embarrassment. Since Jack seemed unwilling to speak, Sarah decided to take the initiative. He caught me off guard, Jack. I wasn't willingly engaging with him. He ambushed me as soon as I opened the door, pushing me against it and kissing me. I didn't see you resisting him. You intervened before I had the chance. I was stunned. It took me a moment to comprehend what was happening, but you struck him before I could push him away. She still wasn't certain if her husband's behavior indicated genuine calmness or if it was merely the quiet before a storm. Throughout their conversation, he remained occupied with his tasks. She almost wished he would express his anger openly. His apparent indifference left her feeling anxious. Well, she prompted. Well, what? He replied, hitting the start button on the coffee maker. Jack, I've never seen you so angry before. I honestly expected you to be packing your bags when I got home. Don't tempt me, he growled, his voice rising slightly. You're damn right I'm angry. That stunt you pulled was immature and disrespectful. The only reason I'm not even more upset is because most people at the party knew what you were doing. But you know what infuriates me more than you making a spectacle of yourself? The fact that you chose to trust one of your shallow friends over me. Have I ever lied to you? Huh? Have I ever given you a reason to doubt me or be jealous? No, never. She had never heard him refer to her friends as shallow before, but she chose not to address it. "Honey, I know how outgoing you are. I've witnessed it. You can strike up a friendship with anyone in minutes, even women. You may not realize it, but I've seen the way they look at you when you walk away. I know they'd be willing to drop their inhibitions in an instant." "Oh, that's ridiculous. You're making me sound like Brad Pitt or something." The situation was escalating. She needed to defuse it before it escalated further. "Jack, all I'm saying is that you have a charming personality. People are drawn to you. I just want you to understand that some women interpret that as flirting. They might think you're available, married or not." She hoped she had eased the tension. "So how does that justify you believing that I go around kissing waitresses and trusting your friend over your husband?" Damn, she thought. She had hoped to avoid that question. Their argument persisted for another 20 minutes without resolution, both refusing to yield on the fundamental issue of trust. Despite their disagreement, neither of them opted to sleep on the couch or in separate rooms, but Sarah sensed that closeness was out of the question. He wasn't in a forgiving mood, and she wasn't willing to degrade herself by attempting to change his mind. The following Tuesday, Jack met Mike for a drink after work. Jack was already seated and had just taken a sip from his beer when his friend arrived wearing a wide grin. "Yo, Rocky, how's Adrian?" Mike quipped, attempting a Stallone impression. Jack glanced at his friend. "Isn't Rocky the one who talks like that?" "Yeah, but I can't pull off a Burgess Meredith impression, so you'll have to settle for what you get," he chuckled, taking a seat beside Jack. He ordered a beer. "Seriously, how are things between you two right now?" "We're barely on speaking terms. I'm still angry, and she knows it, so she tends to avoid me. When are you going to cut her some slack? Most people at the party didn't even realize there was any tension between you two. After you left, some folks were asking about you and Sarah. What did you tell them?" "I said something unexpected came up, and you had to leave." Nobody questioned it. They probably assumed you two were eager to get home and, well, you know, Mike chuckled. "Yeah, well, we haven't exactly been eager to get in bed since the party. Speaking of which, what's the deal with Bob? Is he plotting revenge?" "I doubt it. Dave filled me in on what happened before he drove Sarah home. When I went inside, Bob was just getting back on his feet. He mentioned you landed a sucker punch." "I sure did," Jack interjected. "Well, he was talking about getting back at you, but I warned him to steer clear of you. I told him you're the toughest guy around and that I've seen you take down guys twice your size. I even threw in my favorite Bible quote." "You have a favorite Bible quote?" "I didn't know that." "Sure do. Yeah, though he walks through the valley of the shadow of pass away, he fears no evil, for he's the toughest and meanest SOB in the valley." "That's you." Jack couldn't help but laugh. "That's nonsense, and you know it," he retorted. "Of course, I know it, and you know it, but Bob doesn't. I think I scared him enough to make him think twice before messing with you." "Well, I appreciate that, buddy." They both grinned and took another sip of their drinks. "You know what really annoys me?" Jack began. "That she doesn't believe me about not kissing some waitress. Are you absolutely sure you didn't? Maybe just a peck on the cheek or something like that." "No, I..." He trailed off, and Mike could tell from his expression that he recalled something. You did kiss her, didn't you?" "No, she kissed me," Jack responded. "Damn, I know what this is all about." The following day, Sarah was surprised to see Jack walking into her office at work. He immediately informed her that he was taking her to lunch. Before she could react, assuming it was his way of apologizing, she expressed gratitude but mentioned it was a bit early and asked if he could wait about 20 minutes. Jack reassured her, saying there was no need to wait. He had already spoken to her boss, explained the situation as a minor family emergency, and arranged for an extended lunch hour, which her boss agreed to. Jack urged her to come along, and Sarah, feeling apprehensive as she wasn't aware of any family emergencies, followed him to the car. As she got in, Jack held the door for her. She questioned him about their destination and the nature of the family emergency. He didn't directly answer her question but instructed her to call her friend and get the name of the restaurant where the alleged incident occurred. When she asked why, he simply told her to trust him and mentioned that he believed he had figured something out. Reluctantly, she called her friend and obtained the restaurant's name. DeMars on Homan Avenue, he responded with a smile, commenting on the coincidence that they were headed exactly there. Sarah remained silent but felt increasingly uneasy. She couldn't fathom why he would want to revisit the scene except perhaps to confront her. Would he flirt with the waitress in front of her? She knew he wouldn't do that. She decided to wait and see what unfolded. The journey to the restaurant took nearly half an hour, during which Sarah agonized over numerous scenarios. She was almost in tears when they arrived. Jack placed his hand on her back and guided her inside. She knew trouble awaited her the moment they entered. "Damn," she muttered quietly. Jack found a booth and had Sarah sit first, then joined her. "Well, cuz, looks like you brought your better half today." Sarah blushed with embarrassment. "Hi, Marilyn," she greeted their waitress. "Hi, Sarah. How did you manage to get my cousin here for a real lunch and with his wife, no less? Every time I see him, he's in such a hurry he can barely eat," she joked. Jack wasn't about to let Sarah off easily. "Sarah seems to think you and I are having a passionate affair," he announced. Sarah waited for the punchline before responding. "What? No, Marilyn, that's not true." Sarah turned to her husband. "Jack, come on, I made a mistake. I apologize." She faced Marilyn again. "A friend told me last week that he kissed a waitress here. I didn't even know you worked here." "But we haven't." "Last week," Jack interrupted, "you gave me a peck on the cheek when I arrived." "Oh gosh, Sarah, I didn't mean anything by it." Jack hadn't visited in a while, and it was just a friendly gesture. "Marilyn, don't worry about it," Sarah assured her. "I understand now. My friend misled me into thinking Jack had a thing with a waitress here. I'll be giving her a piece of my mind later." "I'd like to hear that," Jack challenged. Sarah looked at him and accepted the challenge. "All right," she said, retrieving her phone from her purse. Both Jack and Marilyn listened in on Sarah's side of the conversation. "Hi, Linda. Not too good. You know that waitress who you said was kissing Jack? You know who that was?" "Jack's cousin." "Yeah, his cousin. No, I didn't appreciate you telling me. You made it sound like he was having an affair or something. I don't care what you thought. I don't care if you think you see him screwing somebody in the middle of the floor. From now on, keep your gossip to yourself." "Yeah, you too." She almost heard her finger disconnecting. Jack had a hunch it was Linda stirring up trouble. She frequently made derogatory remarks about her own husband. Sarah was worked up after the call. "I truly apologize to both of you. Jack was right. I should have known better." "You have a few more apologies to make when you get home tonight," Jack reminded her. "You're going to apologize to Mike, Linda, and Jenny. What about Bob? You can tell Bob to take a hike. You don't pursue a married woman no matter how much of a flirt she is." Marilyn was still standing nearby. "Who's Bob?" she asked. "Her boyfriend," Jack joked. "Boyfriend?" she questioned. "Don't listen to him, Marilyn. I made a mistake, and he's not done rubbing my nose in it yet." "It sounds like you two had quite a weekend," Marilyn observed. "Let's just say I'm pretty sure Sarah learned a lesson about trust," Jack replied. Sarah was more than a little embarrassed, her face flushed as she opened the menu. "So, Marilyn, what do you recommend?" Later, after dinner, Sarah spent almost an hour on the phone apologizing to their friends, including Jenny. That night, they both lay undressed in bed. "Are you still mad?" "It depends." "On what?" "On whether you still think I would cheat on you." "I never really believed you'd cheat on me. I was worried you might give some woman the wrong impression." I just didn't want you leading her on. He considered her words and remembered how angry he felt watching her flirt with Bob. He'd never admit it, but he did understand her perspective a bit better now. Just as he was about to tell her he forgave her, he felt her hand slide down his body and start tickling his balls. "Come on, honey, you can't stay mad at me," she cooed. He decided he might not tell her he forgave her just yet. Her fingers gently wrapped around his manhood and slowly started stroking it up and down. Within seconds, he felt himself getting hard. Jack closed his eyes and let out a small sigh as her long red hair teased his skin. The loving touch of her lips sent shivers down his spine as she kissed the head of his fully engorged friend. "Oh God," he groaned. She already knew she was forgiven, but Sarah wanted to take it to the limit. She swung one leg over his torso and guided him inside her. She closed her eyes as she leaned forward, resting her hands on his tight abs as she moved back and forth, driving him deeper and deeper. "Oh, baby, I'm not gonna last long," he groaned. "Me either," she replied. Moments later, she threw her head back as her body stiffened. That was Jack's cue, and it was right on time as they both surrendered to intense pleasure. A month later, Sarah and Linda were having lunch together.